existing at the site. The site lies within the countryside, within the greenbelt, and ancient woodland surrounds the site, as you can see here, close up to the boundaries. And a public right-of-way runs along the road frontage here. It comprises a semi-detached cottage, a detached annex, and the outbuildings in this corner, which are to be demolished. I'll go on to the site plan, it might make it all clearer. So to explain here, in the top corner of the screen, you can see there's a group of outbuildings to be demolished. And I have photos of those for you in a minute. This is the outline of the proposed building, so set at a different orientation. This building here, for note, is the existing annex ancillary to the main cottage, which is here, one pair of semi-detached cottages. These are the existing outbuildings clustered together in the corner of the site to be demolished. And this is proposed replacement building, pitched roof, as you can see, garage, workshop and store space within. And the aerial photo, I know it's a bit dark, but it's to try and show you this corner here. If you can see the cursor, that is where the outbuildings are at the moment. They're just hugging that boundary there. And this is the main cottage, which would be ancillary to. This photograph is looking down the lane to the front. And if you were to keep going down and look left, that's where the buildings would be. The site is to the left there. These are the buildings in question. And here is another view with the house to the left off screen. Excuse me. I'll go back to the site plan whilst I've finished the presentation. So as outlined in the officer's report, it's considered to be acceptable subject to recommended conditions. The demolition of the existing outbuildings and the replacement with a new single building of the same use, still to remain ancillary, is not considered to have an adverse impact on neighbouring amenity, on character of the area, and is considered to be appropriate development in the greenbelt, with reduced harm to the ancient woodland because it moves it slightly further away from the existing trees. And as such, the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. But please, could I just draw members' attention to the supplementary agenda? There is a proposed swap for condition 5 on materials to ask for submission of details should permission be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have one speaker from Platt Parish Council. If you'd like to make your way to the microphone, please, sir. Mr. Woodhams. If you press the button that makes red, you'll have 3 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, committee. Whilst on the face of it, this might seem like a reasonable proposal to replace an existing outbuilding with one of a slightly larger footprint, Platt Parish Council has material concerns that this represents a serious prospective breach of the restrictions to development within the Greenbelt. The committee may or may not be aware that this applicant has a track record of manipulating the planning process in order to create new residential accommodation in the Greenbelt at this site. We fear that granting this application without amendment will enable this to happen again. Our reasoning behind this is as follows. First, the existing annex at the site was originally granted permission as a storage building. This was subsequently changed to residential accommodation behind a pair of false garage doors, very similar to the ones in this application. This was achieved through a protracted series of retrospective applications and appeals. Second, we believe that the outbuildings that will be replaced as part of this application never had planning permission in the first place. They only became legitimate as a result of the lapse of the 10-year period for challenge, taking advantage of the remoteness of the site. Third, This application is significantly oversized for its intended purpose, particularly in terms of its height at 5.6 metres. Platt Parish Council is of the view that this is deliberately specified in order to facilitate subsequent alteration to residential accommodation, particularly within the roof void in the first instance. We are not against the principle of replacing the existing buildings with a new one. However, to minimise the risk of a repeated creeping development on the green belt, we request that the existing footprint is not extended, and in particular, the ridge height is restricted to no more than that of the existing buildings at 3.2 metres. This should be perfectly adequate for a visually attractive garage and workshop. We would also like a condition imposed that it should not be used for any living accommodation, even on an incidental basis to that of the main house.
Thank you very much, Rod. Okay, I called this in because Platt Parish Council asked me to. And I called it in on Greenbelt issues. It is, though I'm not sure the pictures actually give you a proper view of where it is. The whole place is inside the woods. These two cottages were keepers' cottages, and they are surrounded by Hurst Woods. The track photograph was deceiving and must have been done during this dry summer, because normally you need wellies just to turn off the road and a four-wheel drive. They're very concerned about the possibility that this applicant is going to do exactly the same as they did before with the other garage application, which I know we can't consider as material to this application, but it is part of the history of the site. I would prefer, as Platt Parish Council have asked, to have the height reduced so that is not as much of a temptation to the applicant to actually make accommodation in there. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much. I won't repeat what the Parish Council said. This site has been a thorn in our side for a long, long time, with infringements of planning enforcement. But none of that is material to tonight's application. We've got to look at this on its own merits. The applicant makes the case that the high roof is being used to match other buildings on the site. And I think the principle of like for like should pertain here, and the roof line of the new building should mirror that. It's a replacement, mirror that of the old building. And simply because of the impact on the green belt, on the woodland, a high roof like that will have a high impact. A low roof matching the existing roof line will have less of an impact. I don't know whether we can impose a condition to that or whether we'd have to defer for a new application. Thank you.
Thank you. Having spoken to the officers, I will check again. I think that we cannot actually make a condition of that this evening. That's correct?
We have had no new plans submitted following your pre-meet on Monday. So no, it will be determined as it stands today.
Obviously, members have the option. I mean, what you've got to consider tonight is the impact in terms of on Greenbelt and in terms of any countryside harm. So that's the consideration you're looking at. The court says they don't consider there to be material harm arising from that. However, if members identify there is a degree, obviously we've got the updated protocol in terms of the amendment policy, which does allow members to look at potential options in terms of a reduced ridge height. Could be a false pitch at the front. I would say, you know, buildings of this ilk in the countryside are characteristic with more steeply pitched roofs. That is a particular character. But I'm just saying members have the option that if they want to consider an alternative and ask the applicant to consider, that could be considered as a minor alteration. And that is an option that's available to members. If that option is taken, then what I would ask members to consider is the principle of development is acceptable as it stands with that alteration. That means that if the applicant accept that, then obviously request that's delegated to the Director of Housing, Planning and Environmental Health to agree that, subject to the changes being received. If those changes come in because it's a reduction, I wouldn't consider it necessary to re-advertise the application on that basis because it's a reduction and it's not having any greater impact. But that is an option, members. So I'll leave you to carry on to the debate and see where you get to. And if we do get to that element, then we consider that as we move forward.
Councillor Hudson.
I note we had we've got an amendment, a supplementary with regard to the materials to be used at a later date. I had a situation a few years ago now with ironically, a garage that they wanted to, a single garage, knock down and build a double garage with room above. And how we got around it to ensure that the room above could not be used as a room above was that we stipulated that the roof material had to be slate rather than Kent peg, because Kent peg is like that and slate is like that. So the height from the bottom of the top floor, as it were, was significantly reduced. And that is one way of stipulating or getting around the perceived height, is by stipulating what materials they should use, which then obviously by stipulating slate lowers it down.
Come back on that. I mean, you know, a clay tile or a Kent peg is a 45-degree pitch on a recommended max. Slate can go down to 22% minimum, but it can go steeper. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest that that's going to restrict accommodation in the upper floor. If you wanted to do that, you've got an option of amendment, or else there could be a condition that's imposed to say the upper floor, because it's not the top floor, the roof space shall not be used for accommodation of any kind. So, you know, there are various options that are open to members if they have concerns, but I wouldn't suggest material palette as being one that's going to stop or control the use of that roof space.
If that is the case, how does one ensure, on the basis it's in the middle of a wood and no one can actually see what is actually happening there? How can we actually ensure that the conditions that we apply to it are observed and enforced without being Big Brother all the time?
Don't do proactive enforcement. That's not something we do. We're reactive in terms of enforcement, and it's generally coming from you know, complaints that we receive in terms of issues. But you know, in most circumstances, it's designed out in terms of if that accommodation is used. But it's very difficult if someone decides to build something behind a garage door and then outwardly it looks like a garage, but inwardly it's not. Then obviously that's very difficult. But in terms of what is some comfort to members is obviously changes to the legislation. It's a 10-year rule now. So any breach of planning is a 10-year, not a 4-year. Historically, it used to be 4-year for dwellings. It's now a 10-year breach. So that should give you more comfort. But the reality on the situation, if it's acceptable as it is, we can't predict what may happen in the future, as members have alluded to, even though there is a history of breaches of planning control. So kind of that's the status as it stands. But as I said, members have the option if you've got concern with the roof, and if you want to look for an amendment, I would consider that would be minor. And there is an option open to go back to the applicant to see if they'll change it. If they won't, they can come back to members. If they do and are prepared to change it, then obviously I would seek delegation to approve the application subject to that change being received. And then that enables the application to be issued and accommodate your changes.
Councillor Taylor again.
Thank you very much. I agree with what James says, that the principle of development, even if we don't like it, is accepted, that thing can be built. But I like the idea of delegating the discussion about roof height to the officers for minor amendments. So I would support that. Thank you.
Councillor Betts?
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if you can just confirm the existing height of the outbuildings in comparison to the planned development height, please.
It's in if we can expand that, it's 3.3 meters, although it never had planning, although I'm assured that over 2.5 should have, but it's now had the 10 years. And okay, so 5.6 for the new ridge height over, it doesn't say, 3.2 and going up to 5.6 meters.
Right, I was just asking the question, so it was read out.
It's actually going, it's over 2 meters higher, 2.5 meters nearly higher.
I was just establishing the difference between the existing height and the proposed ridge height.
Yeah.
So that all members could hear that.
Thank you.
And on that basis, the idea of restricting that ridge height to what's there would indeed lessen the impact on Greenbelt. So on that basis that we want to try and mitigate that impact on Greenbelt, then I think that's a good solution in this case. Thank you.
Councillor Hudson.
I was going to ask, is it possible to simply defer the decision on this tonight to another time so that we can actually go back to the applicant and discuss the roof height rather than, I think it would be better if we could come to some kind of agreement rather than we say, you can build this, but your height is only going to be to this.
Rather than imposing it.
Yes.
Okay, how do you feel about that, Mr. Milley?
Members could. I don't necessarily know if it needs. I mean, in terms of defer, you, as I said to you, you could, on the basis of the amendment policy, seek an amendment with a reduced ridge height, and what it would see, it probably more likely be a false pitch. If I'm honest, false pitch at the front with a mono pitch at the back. But you know, we could have a conversation with the applicant, subject to that being secure, because it's also you want a sort of design issue in terms of a building of character in the countryside, which has a pitched roof, or even if it's a false pitch roof. So subject to that, which secures a lower ridge height, then on that basis, my recommendation would be subject to securing that. And we could do it in conjunction with the agreement of chair on that basis. So the chair would see if the applicant was proposed to do that with the amended designs, and subject to the chair's agreement on that basis, then I would ask for delegation, because otherwise it's coming back to planning committee, and we could do it sort of in a roundabout way without having to come back to committee with the agreement of the chair who would represent members. So I see as a solution way round to get what you're seeking on this scheme.
No, the officer would like to have a word.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the pre-meet, but I have spoken to officers who were, and I believe this was raised with the agent following the meeting, that there was a desire to reduce the roof, and a deadline was given for that to be forthcoming if it was to be considered. And the case officers mentioned to me today that that hasn't happened. So the question may have already been put to the applicant or agent. And so, yes, looking forward to if it's delegated, if we defer to seek a reduction, that's agreed, it's delegated powers. I just wanted to remind members, if that isn't something that the applicant is wanting to do, and then it would probably come back to committee, then I just wanted to remind that the harm to the Greenbelt seems to be key here. And the height, yes, there is a difference, that's not disputed, but the test is whether it would cause substantial harm, and that difference in height from what's there at the moment to what is proposed, the officer's view is it wouldn't be substantial. But I guess that's for you to consider if it was to go down the line to the point where a reduced ridge wasn't an option for the applicant. Oh, sorry, one more thing. There is a condition requiring it is limited to incidental use, condition 3. I think you mentioned about roof space. It doesn't mention roof space specifically, but it's quite clear that it says if permission is granted, it shall only be used for purposes incidental to the enjoyment of the dwelling house and shall not be used, let or sold as a separate unit of living accommodation or for any other purpose without private approval of the local authority. Thank you.
Is there any way we can strengthen that condition, condition 3? Can we, yeah.
Basis of, the applicant is applying for a garage, so you have to normally take it on face value that that's what the applicant is using it for. So, if I'm very honest, an inspector, if this was in front of an inspectorate and you put that condition on, they would probably turn around and say, well, the applicant is proposing it to be used for a garage, that's what it must be used for. So, they wouldn't then sort of normally put a condition for incidental. I think officers have gone over and above on this instance to put an incidental use to give that additional guarantee, but strictly speaking, an inspector wouldn't apply that and would apply the principles that it's being used as a garage and a store. But let's forget any residential use would, if it's an annex, would be ancillary to the use of. So incidental does give you that additional element. If you wish to strengthen it, you could put no use of the roof space. But then as a garage and store, people put stuff up there. Again, what you can't do in planning is you can't predict what may happen in the future. That's the thing. You have to accept what the applicant is putting in there, and there are enforcement powers that you've got if there was a breach of planning control.
So Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. Just to perhaps throw a small spanner in, is it reasonable for the garage to have 4 very large windows in the side? I've got a double garage. It's got one door with very small panes in, and it works perfectly well for me as a garage. So I have every sympathy for what's been said about what it could become, and I understand also that we have to deal with it for what it is. If we're dealing with it for what it is as a garage, what's the purpose for all those windows? Is that, it really looks like something else, doesn't it? And then when you add the roof on the top, I've got real concerns about the height, and the public footpath comes along the front, so it's highly visible from the public footpath. And I understand it said in the report, it's, the way it's tessellated, it's perhaps not as intrusive as it might be if it was the other way around, but it is set further forward within the site, whereas the existing buildings are at the back. So I think perhaps arguably there is harm from the way it's positioned. But yeah, I just wonder if someone could help me with the windows. Thank you.
Windows were something that was discussed, I think, was, yeah. Councillor Banks. Sorry, not Banks, sorry. Bob.
Thank you. No offence. Just one very quick small question. The buildings to the northwest of the proposed plot, what height are they?
Okay. If we've got that, I think we have to go back into an application from, I think it was 2009 or something of that nature, for that building. Yes, the previous annex. There we go. Anybody else would like to speak? Councillor Rao.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in regard to Councillor Tatton's query of windows, I have a workshop with no windows in it, and it's damn near useless. If you've got a workshop, you want light. Otherwise, it's going to cost you a fortune to light it inside. And if you look at the drawing, there are three what appear to be garage doors, and there's a blank area next to that with no window in it, which I presume will be the workshop site. That's not defending the applicant's suggestions, but that's where I would suggest the windows are for.
Councillor Taylor.
I think it's been quite a full discussion about this. I'm happy to move that we approve tonight, subject to the delegated responsibility after the roof discussion, delegated to the chair and the planning department.
So what I would suggest, if members want to go down that route, is that because there's no other areas of concern with the application, that members would be minded to approve the application. It's minded because you don't want to say approve, would be minded to approve the application subject to discussions over an amended roof design, lowering the pitch of the roof, and that be delegated to the Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health. And if agreement is reached on an alternative roof design, that obviously be delegated to the director to issue the decision on that basis. If not, then the application comes back to planning committee for a decision to be made on that basis.
Councillor Taylor.
What he just said.
What he just said. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Round. Else have any comments they'd like to make? No?
So this is the annex. Is that the height that you wanted?
That's the nearest building to it, then yes.
To tell members that actually the YouTube is no longer being streamed due to technical details, and this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded tomorrow. It is 5.6. It sits next to, not far from the original Keeper's Cottages. It sits there. Okay. I have a proposal from Councillor Taylor. Do I have a seconder for that? Oh, we have Councillor Round. Sorry, Councillor Round seconded. Can we take a vote down? We're doing. You want to do we need to go to a single vote? Do we need to go to a single vote, or do we do it on agreement? Agreed. Okay, that's agreed that we will, on Mr. Bailey's wordings for that, and then we will see how we come back from the applicant. Thank you. Our second application this evening is for land at the junction of Merryworth Road and 7 Mile Lane. I will hand over to Larissa for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. The application before you seeks retrospective consent for the erection of a post-mounted advertisement board to provide directional signage for Yotes Court Vineyard. The site is a field located on the junction between 7 Mile Lane and Merryworth Road. The site is screened from the public highway by established hedgerow. It is outside of any defined settlement boundary and it's within the Metropolitan Green Belt. It is adjacent to but lies outside of the Yates Court Conservation Area. The sign would be supported by 2 steel poles standing 3.8 metres above ground, the total height of 4.8 metres, with aluminium composite panels fixed between them. Each panel measures approximately 1.2 metres by 2.5 metres. The sign has a navy background with white lettering showing the vineyard's name, branding, and an arrow indicating the route to the site. It would not be illuminated. Putting some photos up now. So in terms of visual amenity, the site is a largely undeveloped agricultural field enclosed from the road by established hedgerows. However, the setting is not entirely electricity pylons and existing highway signs just at present at the corner, and there are other directional signs along 7 Mile Lane, Merriworth Road, Street. In this context, the introduction of one further directional sign is out of character. The sign would be visually contained by the hedgerow, and while it must be visible from the road in order to serve its function, vegetation around the site helps in its appearance. The sign has a restrained design, muted colours, non-illuminated finish, means that it avoids being visually interesting, and its materials are similar to those of the directional road sign already common in the locality. Overall, it is felt that the sign does not materially harm the openness of the greenbelt or the character of the countryside, and it's going to be acceptable in visual terms. Standing next to highway safety, noted that the Merriworth Parish Council objected regarding highway safety. Kent County Council Highways was consulted and not object to, provided that the sign is set back at least 2.4 metres from the junction. The applicants provided a scaled block plan, and it confirms that those measurements. So to conclude, the signage achieves its functional purpose of directing visitors without causing unacceptable harm to the green belt or highway safety. It also supports a local rural business and by the local economy. Consequently, for approval, subject to standard. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a speaker, Mr. Andrew Hall. Would you like to come forward, sir?
Good evening. This unsightly and illegal hoarding is situated in Merriworth. It is on Greenbelt, an area praised for its scenic beauty and also in a conservation. Also, I'm the only house on this, either in the village or approaching. The words of conservation, Greenbelt, purely screams out protection. Part of your remit includes protection of the land and one of the reasons given for the application was the need to give direction to delivery drivers and customers. In this day of sat-nav, mobile phones and Google Maps, this is a leading call. My practical objections to the hoarding. It is located in a junction which is regarded by many, including our school and local law enforcement officers, as dangerous. Drivers are too speedy, impatient and careless. Any distraction taking their eyes off the road can only add to the level of danger. Again, the word protection springs to mind. The location of the hoarding is not safe. Contrary to points 6.10 and 6.2, it is unsighted to drivers going north to the M20 and M26 by a road direction sign to the south going to Paddock Wood by overhanging trees on the B201. This can only lead to confusion to drivers and again, danger. Where it is not serving its intended function, what is its purpose? No one can read it if they're travelling. No other successful business in our area, for example, Lowes Farm, the Moody Mare, the Swan, on the Green, uses distant signage. The Tap and the Winery in Merryworth only uses signage within its boundaries. The hoarding is set up as a permanent sign. According to the applicant's website, the Oates Court Wine Bar shop is only open from March to October. It is a garish sign. The road, Merryworth Road, is a narrow road with a speed limit of 55 miles per hour. Even if it is for tourists, is it right and proper to increase the road usage without due consideration being given to a reduced speed limit? Please, in your deliberations, remember the words greenbelt, conservation area, scenic beauty, danger, and to the words protection of our countryside. I also note that Merryworth Council have said the site could be changed.
Yeah, if you could just press that button, that'd be lovely. Thank you. Councillor Borton, it's you that called this in. Oh, I apologise. My apologies. Mr. Cooper. I do apologise, sir. Getting ahead of myself.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Those of you who don't know Oates Court, it's a stunning vineyard. It's within Tunbridge and Morling. Sorry, Chair. It's within Tunbridge and Morling's area, an absolutely stunning part of the landscape. And what it produces, which I'm sure some of you may have sampled. I'm not going to open it here this evening, but this is very fine wines that they produce. I'm tempted to open it. The vineyard employs at this time of year 70 local members of the public who work on the farm, and throughout the year it has 22 staff. So in terms of the local economy, it's very important. One of the problems, though, is people finding their way to the vineyard. You need to go from 7 Mile Lane, and then it's down 3 roads. You need to go down Merryworth Road, Forge Lane and Stan Lane. So it's very easy for people to get lost, and that's indeed what has been happening. So the visitors to the vineyard, whether they're walkers, cyclists or drivers, and also people coming to supply the vineyard, whether they are coming in Arctics or vans, maintenance suppliers, as well as people delivering agricultural supplies, they all need to come down those roads, and a lot of them get lost. One of the problems is that the mobile signal is particularly poor. So if we had perfect sat-navs and we had perfect iPads and mobile phones, the sign might not be necessary, but it is particularly poor. People lose signals and then they get lost. Mrs. Ritchie, who's over here this evening, who owns the vineyard, doesn't want people to get lost in the local villages, because some of these are very big lorries and then they have amazing manoeuvres to try and turn around. So this is to get people safely to the vineyard without inconveniencing local people, particularly because of the signal there. It's not objected to by KCC, who, as you know, are the highway authority, as long as it's more than 2.4 metres back from the highway, and it's significantly further back from that. It's not in an AONB, on national landscapes. It's not in a conservation area. It is within the green belt, but your planning officer this evening has said she has no objections from a visual amenity point of view. The sign is needed for direction. It's not going to be illuminated at any time. And your officer states that the impact is not considered to result in any harm. I think that's the emphasis, any harm to the character of the countryside or the amenity of the green belt. So I hope you'll feel able to support the continued development of this vineyard. It's one of the greatest enterprises in Kent and one of the 9 best wine producers in the Garden of England and indeed the United Kingdom. So I hope you'll feel able to support this brilliant local business. Thank you.
Now, Councillor Wharton.
Thank you very much. I think part of the problem with this application is that this is retrospective in its nature, and while that might make the decision easier tonight, it's because we can actually see what we are being asked to determine. The fact it's retrospective, the fact that effectively it had to be invited in by enforcement, I think has caused some of the concern because there was no notification to Mr. Hall and others that the sign was to be erected, which obviously is required. Thank you, Larissa, for a very clear and straightforward report that gets to the heart of the issues faced. Just a couple of key issues to reference. The first is highway matters. I think part of the problem that we have, and Merryworth Parish Council's comments in this regard are worth reading, is that the crossroads of 7 Mile Lane, Merryworth Road and the street is an accident hotspot. It suffers from parking problems at the start and the end of the school day because there's no off-road provision for Merryworth Primary School. The lines are faded, and we're dealing with that, Sarah and I, as local members, through the parking office. And there are lots of issues that are associated with that crossroads that contribute to the accident rate. The consequence of that is that it's a very busy junction at certain points today, and it also has a loss of highway furniture there too. There are effectively traffic islands. There's Larissa pointed out in the presentation, there are power lines. There are some bollards that have been put up on the other side of the road to stop some of the parking problems that happen. That was put up by a private landowner, and you can see from the image on the left-hand side that the hedgerow isn't up against the highway boundary. There is another smaller fence between 7 Mile Lane and the hedgerow. So you then have, there's lots of signage there anyway because it is a busy road. And consequently, that does have the result of being seen to be the cause of many accidents. However, we're a local planning authority. We've got to take our decision on planning matters. The Highways Authority at Kent County Council have decided not to object. While I don't disagree with a lot of what Mr. Hall said in this regard, I'm, I suppose, accepting of the fact that KCC's comments are as such. They're required the sign to be as far back from the road as it is. And the picture on the right, although a very important picture for the determination, we need to just remember that the road is not right up against the hedgerow. The road is a little bit further away to the right-hand side, as we see from the picture on the left-hand side at the moment. It is important that we support the rural economy. The Swan Pub was mentioned, that's just been taken over by the community. The Swan Pub would actually quite like a brown sign at this junction to direct people down the same road to the Swan, because it's at the end of cul-de-sac in West Peckham. So there's another sign that might go up at the junction. We hope it'll go up anyway to support the Swan. So given that, I don't see that we have any highways grounds that we can use, although that doesn't make the junction any safer. And I think there are separate processes in the planning process that need to deal with that. Then it comes down to the impact on the green belt and conservation more generally. And I think Larissa mentioned in her report 6.7, the top of the page there, that the colour palette of the sign is restrained and not visually garish and isn't illuminated, which is an important point. Obviously, it's consistent with Yotes Court's branding. and some of the colours that are used. And I don't think that we as a local planning authority should be dictating to local businesses how they should brand themselves. I don't think there are levers through that, through the planning process. And the question for me is, does it impact on the green belt? Had the sign been bigger in its, like, literally wider and higher, then I think then it certainly could have been. But given how far it is from the ground and the fact it's set back as far, I think it's going to be hard for us to make a case tonight to say that there is a disproportionate impact on the green belt that would stand up against the planning policy tests that we have to determine this application against. I think the report deals with this really. So thank you. Consequently, although I agree with a number of the points that Mr. Hall says about the junction and that Merryworth Parish Council say about the junction, I'm struggling to articulate that into a planning reason for refusal this evening. My final comment on this would be, I think, and I'm happy to work with Yokes Court as a local member to do this, which is just essentially in order to ensure that there's good communication between the immediate neighbours to the site and the business itself going forward, so that we can stop some of these problems before, frankly, they end up at this committee tonight. Because I just think that's an important step that we can take together, and I'm happy to be a conduit for that. In that role. But yes, I'm struggling to see what planning grounds we've got for refusal, but I'd be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor. Do you want to? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Do you want to go first, Councillor Hudson? I didn't see you indicate, so.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Hall for his presentation tonight, and I can quite understand why he's so incensed. The applicant has spent some time here tonight explaining their case and what a wonderful place Yokes Court is. Might have been better if they'd spent that time talking to the neighbours before this all kicked off. But then lack of politeness is not a material planning consideration, and I agree with Councillor Borton. We have no real grounds to refuse this. Thank you.
Councillor Boxall? I'm sorry. Let's Councillor Hudson go first. Is it?
Thank you, Chair. I too have an awful lot of sympathy with Mr. Hall, and I would actually agree with Matt that part of the frustration born of this is the fact that it's retrospective. And when you want to ingratiate yourself within the community that you sit, I think it's always better to bring people with you rather than do what you fancy doing, and then when you get caught, having to then put in a retrospective planning application, which is unfortunate. The picture is brilliant on the left because it's just after the hedges were cut. You couldn't really see an awful lot of the sign for a wee while because the hedgerows. And that would actually be my thing, that whilst it's great possibly in winter time, when I don't necessarily think the cellar is open as often as it would do in the summertime, but whilst contractors are not able to cut the hedges, and where that position of that hedge is, there is no justification in hedgerow terms that it would need to be cut before the end of August. So I kind of a bit concerned that it's sort of counterproductive insofar as when you really want it to be observed and noticed, it's not going to be because of the height of the hedging. So yeah, I mean, as I said at the pre-meet, there's not an awful lot we can do about it, unfortunately, insofar as approving it. But I do think that for future reference, we really need to engage with the local community and get everyone on side first. No one wants to see a business not thrive, especially in these current economic conditions. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Let Councillor Boxall speak first. Yeah, it's totally agree with you, Councillor Hudson. Councillor Boxall.
Yeah, just to sort of reiterate some of the comments, I am struggling to see why this is in front of the planning committee tonight. There are 21 signs in March 2023, according to Google Earth, that surround that junction, one of which is a local craft fair that no one seemed to call in to committee to complain about. So I support the officer's recommendation.
Any other speakers for this evening? Councillor Tanner.
Sorry, I'm in trouble with my button there. I know it's not illuminated, and hopefully it wouldn't become illuminated, but should there be a condition about it not being illuminated?
Very good point. I know you want to come back, Mr. Taylor, Ms. Baird. If I get names right this evening, that'll be really, really good. Mr. Bailey, and you also wanted to make another comment.
Just looking at the condition. Normally, these are standard conditions that are imposed on bottom on 1 to 5. Looking to see if there's illumination on that point. I mean, that can easily be imposed. You can just put a condition to say it shall not be illuminated on that point. I just wanted to raise another point because much has been made about retrospective nature, and I should just remind members that obviously advertisement consents are the same to a degree in terms of enforcement action in relation to TPOs and trees and conservation areas. It is an offence on summary conviction to erect a signage without the necessary consent. So there is powers that the local authority have in relation to that, not in relation to this particular sign, but I'm just reminding you on the basis that in terms of retrospective applications, especially in relation to signage, the government has said that it's important that obviously there are very few. I could put a house in someone's back garden and that wouldn't be an offence, but to erect a sign retrospectively is an offence on summary conviction. So just to give you some confidence in the system that whilst I appreciate it's retrospective, there are levers that the local authority have in relation to unauthorised signage, and we could seek to prosecute those serious cases in those events. So just to give you some indication of the legislation behind signage. Thank you.
Councillor Borden.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Councillor Tanner for her suggestion, which I think would be helpful and reassuring. Sorry. It's me getting all names wrong today. So I'm sorry, but anyway, whoever you are, thank you very much for that. And that's one of the reasons actually we're planning committee today. Obviously, Mr. Hall had contacted us. We've been through the enforcement procedure. I thought it was important after discussing this with Mr. Hall that he had the opportunity to put across his case, and subsequently we've been able to, provided the committee's in agreement, strengthen the conditions. I think that's quite important. One of the issues, as I say, around the illumination is that the speed limit on 7 Mile Lane as you head southbound, come down to the bottom of the hill. We're doing lots of work about reducing the speed limit there, or Sarah is to be precise through her case speed capacity, but there continues to be a speed enforcement problem on 7 Mile Lane when it's not full of cars at the start of the school day, and that's why I think the illumination's very good. We also have precedents for this with the B&M bargains Umbridge that was in a conservation area and was subject of many years of applications and appeals, enforcement issues, and the planning inspector being kept very busy by it in terms of their decision. Yes, it's somewhere else in the borough, but nonetheless, it's important to demonstrate that effectively our policy would support that condition and it would do something.
Councillor Roud.
Thank you, Chair. I'd support this application based on the fact that I suppose I'll call it recent career, was a few years ago, was working with local deliveries, both in agricultural materials and fuel oils. And I wouldn't like to guess how many times I've had calls from customers saying, "Where's your vehicle?" And they ring the driver and he says, "I can't find it, there's no signage." And a lot of them, believe it or not, are vineyards because you can't see them from the road. So I think any signs that help delivery drivers are a great advantage. With respect to the accidents on that road, my last depot was no more than 150 metres from this junction, And I can't even guess how many accidents I've attended. When you hear a bang, you go and help. Most of those are not because people have been looking at signs or looking for where to go. It's because they're tramping down 7 Mile Lane at extortionate speeds, and people try and jump out of Merryworth Village to try and beat that. And they're usually T-bone accidents. There are not rear end shunts. So on that basis, I'd support.
Okay, any other, Councillor Banks?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is quite unusual as applications go. It's probably the first one that I've got involved in, which is to do with signage. But I know that this is consent to expire after the end of a period of 5 years. So most of the planning that we look at, it's a situation, whether it's agreed, it's there for keeps. If this really is a problem, then it's going to be something that can be looked at again in 5 years' time.
Anybody else would like to speak? No? Can I propose then that subject to an additional condition regarding lighting, illumination, that we accept the officer's proposal for acceptance of this? Can we do it by affirmation or do we need a vote? Agreed? Agreed. Oh, second, sorry. Councillor Boulton needs seconding. So that is passed. There are no public appeals or planning appeals or anything we need to look at. I have no urgent items, and therefore I will close the meeting at 8:33. Thank you very much for your attendance.